We are live.
We're live.
We made it for another week of Robert Greene.
Yeah.
Today we talk about Chapter 8, Strategy 8, from the 33 Strategies of War, which is to pick your battles carefully. The perfect economy strategy. I'm interested if anything comes to mind to you of a battle that you got into that in your life that you regret, or that you ended up weaker than, let's say, going into it. Is there something that comes to mind to you?
There was a property that I wanted really, really bad at all cost. I thought it was going to make a big difference because I was thinking of moving my office into it. And we were growing, and our office actually was small compared to how we had grown. Thank God. Anyway, long story short, I made an offer that was way above market value. They weren't reasonable. They were asking for a lot. I think they saw in me that I wanted that property at all costs. I believe that's the vibe I gave out, because I really, really wanted that property. And they were asking me for everything but my firstborn. I mean, it was incredible. Fortunately, I went to an event that was related to our insurance business. And there was a guy speaking there that said, be careful in all the effort and energy that you put into something that you obtain or trying to obtain, because it can leave you weak for the future. And that, it was like impacted me. And then I went back and I reviewed everything. And it was really, really difficult to do, but I tried to take the emotion out of the deal. Like, what if this was just any other property, but not something that I wanted to move into so badly? And the deal didn't make any sense whatsoever. The numbers weren't there in my favor. The terms weren't there in my favor. And I walked away from that deal and regretted it for some time. It's only later on in life that I said, you know what? It wasn't the end of the world. I ended up finding another property, moving into that property, and in much better standing, because this particular deal would have left me without any cash. I was pouring everything into it. And so I think the good Lord, the energy on the earth, Buddha, whatever, we believe in the Lord, right? So I think he guided us, because, your mom was not in it. Your mom was not into the deal. But at the end, she says, you know what? If this means so much to you, I don't want to be an obstacle in your path. And so I was going to, have we done it? Maybe we would have survived it, but I would have taken the family in a different direction. And it comes to mind, I wanted it so badly that I was willing to bypass a lot of the normal, the numbers didn't make sense either.
So in this situation, you actually caught yourself and pulled back.
Yes.
Which is what Greene is saying, that we need to catch ourselves.
Well, it wasn't due to my own efforts. I just happened to go to, because we were like a lean, mean marketing machine. If you remember growing up, we had like marketing events before COVID, folks. Back to back. We had it Tuesday. We had Wednesday mornings in Montebello, Thursdays in Arcadia. I mean, it was just pop, 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 one thing after another, because we were generating business to come into the agency.
Yeah.
And so I was always going to these things. And, self-improvement is a big thing. If you just pick up one thing, it may change your life. And that guy changed my life, because he said, be careful what you get into. If you overlook and since then, I've kind of had a standard to follow. There was one place that I bought and I paid a premium for it. You remember it. It was the big across the street, 9087. And shortly after I put it into escrow, all kinds of people came out of the woodworks trying to buy it. But I was already in escrow. But I paid a premium for that one because I had a vision. And so if you have a vision that nobody else has, you know, it's your dream. Nobody's dreaming your dreams. So I say also consider it, but be careful.
Be careful. Yeah, that's one thing. How do you know when, let's say, this is a little bit of a, it's gonna put me out of my comfort zone. I'm stretching myself thin here, but I have a vision. And how do you know when to make that decision and move forward steadfast, or say, you know what, I'm biting more than I can chew. Let me move into a, let's say, a building, but it's a not as big of a building, not as much of a risk.
I'm here to tell you it's extremely difficult. And I'm here to tell you that I wasn't wise enough to see that. Somebody else gave me a tip that, you know, it just went and landed on me. I guess my you know, like I was ready to receive that advice, let's say. But he was talking to a public of over 200 people or 100 people. Okay? And yeah, you have to be careful. I don't know the answer.
Yeah.
Okay? I don't know the answer. And back then, I wasn't wise enough to pull back on my own. It was an extra outside force that landed that thought in my head that took me back to the drawing board. And I ended up, I don't think we were in escrow yet. We might have been, and then during the contingency period. So,
Yeah.
but yeah, you know, and it goes to what he's talking about, right, Mike? The Pyrrhic War?
Yeah. The Pyrrhic?
The Pyrrhic, yeah.
Yeah.
I mispronounced that.
King Pyrrhus.
King Pyrrhus, yeah.
Yeah. So what is what is it called? A Pyrrhic victory.
Yes.
That is a victory that even though you won, it's the equivalent to having lost.
Right.
Because you won the battle, the war, but you're defeated. You've lost so much in the process. It costs so much. That was a very powerful example and just a topic that he touched on. The fact that you can win and you still lose.
Right. It's fascinating. And, you know, again, you know, Robert Greene, the level of research that he does. But, you know, he says, look, realize that there are hidden costs to a war. And one of them that I remember right off the top, I don't even need to look at my notes, is one that he said, you can potentially create an enemy that is bent out of shape for revenge.
Mm-hmm.
You just created an enemy for a lifetime.
That's one of the 48 laws of power. Careful who you offend.
Careful who you offend.
Yeah.
You could fuel someone's fire to come after you, and that can be their sole purpose for the rest of their life.
Yeah.
To destroy you. And I'm telling you, if you have somebody like that, good luck to you. God bless you, and arm yourself. You need to do a lot of soul searching and personal growth, and God knows what. Arm yourself with a shield, whatever it is, because you created an enemy of substantial force. You know. But yeah, what happened there on that with the Romans is that what was his name? Pyrrhus?
King Pyrrhus.
He defeated the Roman in 2 major battles.
Yeah.
But after the second battle, he was so devastated. He lost so many of his battle-tested soldiers and generals, you know. And think about it. It would take a full generation to you know, it would take another 20 years to have a child grow into a warrior. There was no way that he could replace that army overnight, the losses that he took. So he ended up winning the war, right? Or the 2 battles.
Yeah.
But he had to go back with his tail between his legs because he had nothing left.
Yeah.
So, and if you think about it, you know, you exert all your resources into something that potentially may not be in your best interest.
You know, it reminds me of, we've talked about people, you've given the example of you're throwing good money after bad, right? Because you have this dream of making something work. Can you explain what that means, throwing good money after bad?
You've got, it's like a, what do you call it, a black hole. Okay? You purchase something, you spend a lot of money on it, and then something pops up that needs more attending to, but it's an economic debacle. And you can see that a lot of times with, purchasing agencies, okay? Because you're purchasing the goodwill, right? And the goodwill, you have to be very careful because everybody's attacking you. Not only do you have your competition, but in some cases, the person that sells to you has a hidden agenda.
Yeah.
Like all the time, whenever I bought an agency, I wanted to make sure that the person that was selling to me was retiring. And the one time that I didn't follow that rule and that person did not retire, that purchase hurt me. As the years went by, we turned it into something positive, but the initial effect, it was getting hurt.
Oh, we know of someone that bought an agency, and the woman that sold him the agency ended up opening another insurance agency and stealing a large portion of the clients.
Horrible.
Now,
how do you live with yourself? Because you're destroying somebody's life. And for those of you...
well, it's necessity or who knows what.
Oh, but
yeah.
Still. But see, so without getting too technical, the covenant not to compete is not easily enforceable. Read it up, folks.
Yeah.
When you're buying a business and you have a covenant not to compete, it's not easily enforceable. It's extremely vague, and you can talk to attorneys and so forth. We're not attorneys, we're not CPAs, and so...
Now, good money after bad also could be, let's say I have a business just generating income, and it's doing very well. And then I also have this dream of opening another type of business that's not in the same lane. And I take the good money that I've generated from this profitable business and I throw it into this new business that actually is just losing money. It's just a money hole.
I did that.
Yeah, and that a lot of times, and when Greene talks about what happened to the King Pyrrhus, is that I think it was ego and emotion, and he had this vision of conquering Italy.
Right.
And beating the Romans, which he was a Greek. He was he had a Greek army.
Yeah.
And so he had that, and he thought he could be just as good, or the descendant. He was a descendant of Alexander the Great, right? And so he had all these grandiose thoughts.
Yeah.
And that took over him.
Yeah, where your ego is, you need to keep your ego in check. No doubt about it. Because if you're doing things out of emotion, most likely you're going to take a hit, and a big one, and you're going to lose. And, I made money in the insurance business, and I was in the real estate. And then I took that money and I bought a pizza place, a food thing. And I lost my shirt, Think about it. I'm doing well in the business world, and owning a restaurant is a business. So I figure there's nothing different from owning a restaurant and owning an insurance company or a real estate company. There's nothing different. It's a business just like any other. No. Every business has its own track, and you have to be very careful. There is a way of doing things, but I didn't have the knowledge. I took good money, bought this pizza place that was doing very well, and there were a few things that I made a mistake on the contract of the purchase.
Small things, right?
Yeah, small things.
That ended up being big.
That ended up affecting us, and we lost a lot of money.
So you had both businesses going on?
Yeah.
Oh, okay. Wow.
Yeah. So, and if you look at that, the amount of money that you lose in this business, in this case, my pizza place, took me back, a whole 2 years. Because to make that money back, if you start looking into that, so you have to hack your brain and not let it affect you. And then it's like we say, regrets. What do you do with regrets? You let them go.
Yeah.
Because if you don't let them go, they're going to eat you up alive. So keep moving, folks. Keep getting up,
Don't let it pull you into a depression. Or,
No.
One thing that this strategy 8, he says he calls it the perfect economy strategy. The perfect economy strategy. I didn't initially understand what he means by that. What I understand, the way that I understood it, is that he means you're using your resources to their best maximum abilities and efficiencies. That's what you're doing. And then he gets into the idea of having a poor man's mentality, because somebody in poverty is forced to be creative, is forced to have ingenuity and use their limited resources to the maximum efficiency. And I thought that was interesting, because when we are in comfort, when we are in abundance, it's a weakness.
That's
and
right.
It made me think a lot about the mentality of you and my grandparents that came from Cuba, and they came with this mentality of from what I understand, like, there were limited resources, right? Everything was being rationed in Cuba. You had these what were they?
La libreta.
La libreta. And so
It's a little booklet.
And so you had limited amount of rice each month, limited amount of milk each month, right, in Cuba at the time. And so when you guys came here, everything had to be saved. Everything that you had, Grandma would save.
Yeah.
And there was this story that I don't know if it was something that Grandma lived or you lived or was heard, that, you would reuse the grounds of coffee.
That's right.
And I think about that often, because I'm like, it doesn't taste as good. It's watery. Yeah, but that's all you
drinking
got.
Something.
That's all you got.
That's all you got. You have to use it.
So
and you used it not twice. I mean, you used it a bunch of times until they disintegrate on you.
You reuse the oil that you were cooking with.
For sure. You never threw that away.
So those things, it's interesting, because if you don't grow up being exposed to that at all, and I had very limited exposure to that, only stories, and I know Grandma would sometimes reuse oil and things. I remember her saving it, right, and she would reuse it for maybe something else she cooked that day. But it was the mentality of coming from Cuba.
Yeah, and it affects you to this day.
Sure.
I'm affected by that. Like, for example, I don't know what's going to happen when I say this, but the Keurig cups. Okay. So you use it once, right? And normally you throw it all away. I was listening or reading a Stoic thing the other day, and it said, get yourself out of the comfort zone, this and that, whatever. And I looked at it and I go, you know what? I'm going to reuse it. Those are things that pull me back into my childhood of kids. So I used the Keurig cup twice. Try it, folks. It tastes a little bit more watery, but hey, you're still drinking coffee. The grounds are there,
Yeah.
And so I ended up doing it the other day, and I said, it's not so bad, If I was back in Cuba, I would have no choice.
Yeah.
I would have no choice. In fact, I wouldn't have the Keurig anyway.
Right.
That would be a luxury probably only extended to the super elite over there or the government people. So, and I ended up drinking the coffee again. And it's not so bad, But I come from a different place where and to be honest with you, I didn't suffer that much because my parents made sure that I had everything that I needed,
Tell us a story about the that time that it was Christmas and that you had the turrón.
Yeah. So we went so in Cuba you had this little booklet, and the little booklet said what you could get and what you couldn't get. And it was minimal. Like it was 1 pint a week for milk. So it could be. My grandkids today drink that in one day, you know, and so but you had it over there for a week, in a day, and half. Anyway, and so we went to the store and they gave us this turron, which is like a sweet thing, you know.
Some Spanish
Yeah, it's from Spain.
Almond cookie, let's
Yeah,
say.
from Spain. And we only got that once a year during Christmas, okay? And it was given to the masses, you know, as a good gesture of the communist regime. Anyway, and it was a little thing like this. And my mom said, okay. She unwrapped it, she put it on the table, and I think I was like 8 years old. And she says, okay, I'm going to the kitchen, I'll be right back. And she came back with a little thing of milk, and she goes, where's the turrón? And I said, I ate it. I ate it. And I didn't think much of it then, but as the years went by, I realized she was going to split it or give me the bigger half, but at least try a little bit, because we were all in that kind of environment of necessity, you know? And so thinking back, I'm thinking, oh, I ate the whole thing. It was very little, you know, for an 8-year-old to be able to munch it down.
Yeah.
I took it all. And she came back and she goes, where is it? You know, I ate it. I mean, it wasn't, you know, and then I went out to play. 8 years old.
Yeah, and
Crazy.
we can't imagine that, you know, growing up. You know, if you're growing up in a situation where you don't have, you know, where you have everything, right? Remember in The Godfather 2, I believe, with Robert De Niro, where he comes home with a loaf of bread, and it's just him and his wife. And
A loaf of bread or a pear?
or was it a potato?
A pear.
It was a pear? Oh, okay.
It's a pear. And he puts it on the table, and the wife goes, oh, look, you brought a pear. I do remember that.
It was a pear.
I think so.
And they were happy
Yeah.
because they had something to eat. So it's an interesting perspective. And abundance makes us poor in reality. That's a quote from this chapter, from this strategy. Abundance makes us poor in reality. So if you're going up against somebody that's living in abundance and you're not, you have a lot of advantages because you're looking at all the angles. You're forced to be creative. And you can use that to their against them.
Yeah, I hear you. But, you know, maybe, so the first generation, what is it? What is that quote that we used to say? The first generation builds it, the second generation maintains it, and the third generation destroys it. Remember that?
It's not always the case
Not
because
always
there
the
are.
case.
I like to look at the examples that are exceptions to that.
Okay.
You know, like you look at I think the In-N-Out family is on the third generation, right?
Yeah. Well, they're doing very well.
They're doing very well.
But they were shocked by a very, unfortunately, an accident,
That's true.
an airplane accident,
Yeah.
took a lot of the VPs, which were all families. They were like brothers and uncles there and stuff.
Yeah.
And so a lot of the management layer of In-N-Out overnight, unfortunate, you know, airplane accident. And I think,
Passed away.
yeah. And so I don't know the story exactly, but I think the grandma had to come back into the thing. And now the granddaughter, you know, so that's a shock to the system. And if
It's
you're
not normal. It's not
not normal.
typical.
Right.
Yeah, because there are plenty of examples of second generation destroys it.
Yeah.
There are also
The
examples.
Third generation.
There are also examples
Yeah,
of the first generation, and then they make so much money and they maybe go too far, where I don't know if you want to call it greed or not knowing when to stop, and they lose it too. I mean, we just went to a real estate event where these people are on a panel on stage, and they're all talking about how 2008 wiped them out. One person in particular said, I had bankruptcies and foreclosures. I lost everything. I had to start completely from the ground up in 2008. So, you know, how does that happen?
When you live in abundance, it depends where you come from. How do we like for example, for my grandkids, how do I instill in my grandkids um, this work ethic and diligence, and the fact that Greene says all over the place, that abundance makes you soft, and in order to avoid that, you have to have a daily recognition, let's say, or reminder, okay, to improve and search for knowledge and stay in the game. Because you got to keep your ego in check. There's a lot of things, but I'm telling you, in this country, in the United States of America, it is the land of opportunity, folks, and it still is. All you have to do is want to try and not be lazy. Like the story with that guy that he found a piece of plywood, and with that plywood he cut it and started removing the snow off the houses of the elderly people, right? And they paid him $100 or $200, and he didn't even have enough money to buy a shovel. And now he owns 2 trucks, 2 employees, and that's what he does. He removes the snow from people's front houses, and he has developed a niche into the elderly. So once you get going, your friends, your older friends, hey, I got this guy, he can remove the snow, this and that, and phone calls start coming in. That's how you build a business.
Yeah.
But if you give your children too much, then they won't appreciate what they have. One person that I have a great deal of respect for is Patrick Bet-David. He used to be in a German refugee camp, and he's come from nothing, and he seems to have kept it together. He forces his children to read books, and he gives them compensation like a Lego game. So the compensation that he gives them is still instructional. You can build this, I'll buy you this, they like Legos, right? So if you read this book and this book, you can get this Lego game. And it's still something that you have to build, you have to put your... So, you need to be diligent with your kids to make sure... I have friends that their kids won't even take out the trash. They're so lazy, they're couch potatoes. They don't want to... And if they take out the trash, they think that they've done you the favor of the year, So...
Yeah.
I think we got sidetracked here, man.
Well, we're talking about abundance, because Greene got into it saying that when you're living in abundance, you don't think of death, because you're not in a survival state, because you have a lot of things. And so when you don't think of death often, you aren't you're not being, as he calls it, perfect. You're not in a perfect economy. There's waste. But when you are in a survival state, because you have no food to eat, or you're thinking of potentially death, and so it forces you to think differently and use your resources to the max.
Yeah. Well, he gives the example of Queen Elizabeth when she was fighting the...
Queen Elizabeth I.
Right. When she was fighting the Spaniards.
King Philip II, I believe.
I think so. So King Philip,
yeah,
he had a lot of money because of all the colonies he had. So he had the biggest armada. So he threw money after money, trying to do... Because she did that secret war with Sir Francis Drake and... what was the name of the other guy? Walter Riley, I think. And so...
The Pirateers.
And they were financing those battles, the Spaniards, from money from the Italian wealthy merchants. So they were getting deeper, and she essentially bankrupted them. She bankrupted them.
And they had more... They were more powerful, and they had more money.
Right, but she fought them on her own terms, not on theirs.
Super strategic.
And you and I should keep this in mind, because right now we're about to step into the purchase of a property that we really like and we really want, and we should make sure that our wants and our whatever don't affect the numbers that we're looking at.
Yeah.
You know, still negotiate the best we possibly can. I think a fair deal can be managed all the time. And by fair is, both sides can potentially, come out victorious and win. You don't necessarily have to destroy your opponent and step on their heads and take away every thresh of dignity that they have. That's not a victory. That's a slaughter. And
That's how some people do business, though.
I know, but
Yeah.
I know, but yeah, some people do business that way.
I remember one time I had this property that I was trying to find a partner to, or someone to buy it.
Mm-hmm.
I had it in escrow, and I was trying to find a partner. And then I called this one person, and he tells me, "Oh, I'm a bottom feeder."
Oh.
He says, "When I'm buying a property, I'm getting it for dirt cheap.
Don't come to me."
Yeah. What you're asking for is too much." And I thought I had it under market value. I mean, not to a point where it was enough for someone like this to jump into the deal. But I just thought that was interesting. I never forgot it because I'm a bottom feeder. So when that's person,
very interesting, because he knew his wow.
Yeah, he wasn't even gonna make a bid on it.
No, he's very successful.
He is, but the way that he buys is pretty much you're getting it for the cheapest, and so the other person, you can say, is getting hurt to a certain extent.
Oh, for sure, a bottom feeder, he's gonna
take it for the lowest price possible.
Right. And they're not thinking about necessarily hurting somebody. They're thinking about this is business and this is cutthroat. Look, that happened to me one time. I had a property and I wanted to get another one. And so I called my neighbor, who is a very, very wealthy businessman and owns a ton of property in that particular city. And I said, "Hey, listen, I'm looking for a quick sale. Would you be interested in making me an offer on this particular property?" And he says, "Well, let me look at it, this and that." And then he called me back 24 hours later and said, "Look, Pablo, I'm not even going to make you an offer because I don't want to offend you. But I am sure that what you have in mind is not what I have in mind. And, we have a business relationship. It's not worth going down that route. So I don't even want to make you an offer. You got to sell it to somebody else, buddy." And I said, "All right. I respect that."
Yeah.
And we've maintained the relationship, Because, you make an offer that's so bad and you end up potentially offending the person that's selling.
Yeah.
And so, especially if there's their home.
Oh.
That they're
Yeah. There's a lot of emotion involved. There's ego.
Absolutely.
There's also ego involved.
Right.
And so that's the art of negotiation and knowing how to work that. That's what I think these books are.
Oh.
Make us much better negotiators just in every aspect of life, because you have to be thinking, what is the other person? That's one thing that Greene is saying here. He's saying, look, if you're going to go into battle with this person, you have to look at the cost, like you said. Well, how is the other person going to react? How much time is it going to take of me? What is it going to do to me? I mean, the example is that I've heard several times is like when somebody is in the presidency of the United States, how they age. That's the cost of leading the country. It ages you. And you see people go through different things in life. They come out a different person.
Oh. No doubt about it.
We come out a different person when we choose to embark on certain uphill battles, let's say. Now, sometimes you can say, well, those are the battle scars and they make me better. That's part of the process. Yeah. If you live to fight another day. Some people take battles and they don't come out alive.
Well, I know a couple businessmen that they got, let's say they bought more than they could chew, and they ended up in the hospital. Okay, one of them was dehydrated, and the other one had a stress attack. And so, you know, is it worth it? You're, and why can't you? You're not able to see it. As wise as they both are, because they're both very bright people. They were not able to discern the fact that by obtaining this, it's going to take so much out of me that it's going to affect me in somewhat of adverse
Health-wise.
Health-wise, when your health is affected, you know. But you're right about these books. You know, these books. You and I going through this and reading them and trying to bring value to our viewers. It has transformed us.
Yeah.
It's something that I was not completely aware of when we started our YouTube channel. You know, I knew we had to bring value to our viewers, and I knew that our goal was to, you know, grow the audience and so forth. But in the process of doing all that, going through these books has actually transformed us.
Yeah.
Has changed us, and I think for the better, you know. And hopefully, you know, I read something the other day that there's a lot of people that go through the views on the channel, but they don't subscribe. If you could get everybody that views to subscribe, your subscription will go up by 40 to 50%, which would mean we would double our subscribers. So, folks, if you can share with the family and friends and subscribe, that would be great. If you think that we're providing some kind of value.
So the idea of over-economizing, I thought that was another important point, because Greene is saying that you can also overdo it, and you end up being cheap, and you never deliver a fatal blow when you over-economize. So you don't want to. You want to use your resources to their best efficiencies, right? To their most efficient. However, you don't want to cut back to the point where you're never actually able to be victorious because your hits are so weak.
Correct. And going back to your point, you know, he says, don't fall into the comfort trap. Push yourself every single day, and try to learn something new.
You're doing that.
Huh?
You're doing that.
I'm trying.
And you've always done that. That's one thing that you were talking to somebody the other day, and you were speaking a little bit, I think, in Mandarin, and they were saying, "Where did you learn Mandarin?"
Oh,
This
yeah,
and that.
yeah.
And then you said, "Well, you know, I wanted to learn a little Mandarin, and my friend wanted to learn a little Spanish, and so we would teach each other." And this was when you were how old?
40.
40 years old. Now
Yeah.
you're 65, and you're still taking classes.
66.
66. Yeah.
I was 41.
You're still taking classes and learning.
Right. And we are going to be sharing something that we're doing new
Yeah.
to our viewers, you know. I don't know when we do that, but anyway, I was 41. He had a business, you know, only in America. This is the best country in the world. I couldn't do this in Cuba, I'll tell you that. But he had a business. He's of, where's he from? He's from Taiwan, and he speaks 8 languages fluently. Okay? And he needed to, his Spanish was not so good. And I met him at a function, at a city function. We went to the city hall, and he was there. And we got to talk, and he said, "You know, do you speak Spanish fluent?" I go, "Yeah." He goes, "I'm looking for an instructor to teach me Spanish, because my business is selling Spanish dictionaries to Latin America and mostly Mexico." And this is a guy, he's Chinese descent, born in Taiwan. Okay? And his Spanish was good, but he wanted to have it at a super higher level. But his Spanish was good. And I said, okay, well, I'll tell you what. You teach me Mandarin, and I'll teach you Spanish. And we'll do 2 days out of the week. One day I learn the Mandarin, one day I'll teach you the Spanish. And he goes, okay. And we went through a whole book in Mandarin. And I remember recording and all that stuff. And it made a difference with some of my clients. Because
Absolutely.
when you speak the language, a lot of barriers come crashing down.
Yeah.
And, and they respect the fact that you try to learn a new language. And I'm here to tell you, Mandarin is not that easy because it's a tonal language. So if you're off on the tone, you're in a world of hurt.
Yeah, you can offend somebody very easily.
Yeah, you can be calling somebody a horse instead of a mom, instead of a mother. So, yeah, you have to be careful. And I learned it already when I was older. I think I was 41, 42, something like that. So, it's not like learning it when you're 6 or 5, when your hearing is perfect.
Yeah. But, I think that it has to be our mission in life, is to constantly seek new, challenging, thought-provoking projects or endeavors, because it's the only way, I think, to keep the mind sharp. Like, that's why, a big part of why you're doing it, right? You want to keep your mind sharp and learn new things.
Absolutely. We'll throw it out there. You're cool?
Yeah.
I'm opening up a digital company, a social media digital company. Actually, it's ready to go, and we're going to launch it. And my main source of income, as yours, comes from our real estate endeavors, and I also have an insurance office. So I'm doing this to keep the mind active and to continue to learn things, because I'm 66 years old. And you know how when you're doing things on the phone, you get all these algorithms. There's a neurosurgeon online. He's very known. His father studies and takes tests for fun so that he can keep his brains active and avoid Alzheimer's and stuff like that. And he's the grandfather of this neurosurgeon that I follow online. His grandfather studies and takes tests for fun. So it's, you have to stay active as you get older, folks. So I decided to go into this world of digital e-commerce, and I'm opening my own company. It's taken me there's knowledge here to learn forever. I'm a businessman, so if I make money on this, I will welcome the money, okay? But my main source of income doesn't come from this. The original thought was stay active, mentally. And this is a never-ending, I guess you can say that about a lot of fields, right, Mike?
Yeah. Where could the viewers find it, your digital company?
The viewers can find it at pablospointers.com. No apostrophe S. pablospointers.com. And I haven't officially launched it yet, but the site is up, and there are actually 2 products there already. And I'm going to find out if these 10-year-olds are really making $4,000 and $5,000 a month. Right now, I've made nothing. But, the original thought was, let's get involved in this and let's learn all we can, keep the mind active, and boy, has it ever been.
It's very cool. It's a very nice website.
Well, thank you. You helped me with it. You helped me build it,
So
it didn't take no 10 minutes. Like, some people out there say it takes 10 minutes, and you go on Canva and you click here and you click there. You were there with me, helping and teaching me.
It's always, I think that people always make it seem more basic and more simpler than it really is,
there's a lot to be said about everybody that's out there. There's a lot of fluff. There's a lot of stuff that's not really uh, the way it is. It didn't take no 10 minutes for me. It took a lot longer than that. Uh, I say that if there's someone out there that can do this in 10 minutes, they're probably the Michael Jordans of, digital companies. Because you have to learn to navigate through different platforms.
Yeah.
And you and I were there. You were my consigliere, and you were very instrumental in all of this. And 2 computer classes behind me. So anyway, keep learning, keep improving. That's what you need to do.
Always.
Some people don't have the ability to do it. We make our money. We don't make our money in YouTube. Not anything.
We make money on YouTube. They pay us, but it's not enough for
not enough to make a
cup of
living
coffee.
yet.
No, we have to dedicate ourselves to other endeavors. This is a passion project.
Right.
And I think that's part of why we've had the success that we've had to this point, because to me, every subscriber to our channel is somebody who wants to hear us, and that's a form of success. Somebody who's getting value out of what we're putting out as a father and a son, sharing ideas and sharing business endeavors, and also we, over everything, value the relationship that we have. That's what's most important, because if the business goes south, if something goes wrong with the business, we still want to have a good relationship as a son and a father. And so that's number one. And since that's our priority, it kind of makes the rest easy, because whenever something does come up in business, it's a clear understanding that it doesn't affect the relationship. Now, some people mix them, and we know of families, and you've mentioned to us many times growing up, hey, look at these brothers who were so close. They had a business together. They had restaurants together. And they fought, and now they don't even talk. And so that, we grew up hearing that, and so we realized, and learned, no, you got to put the relationship first. And the business is important, making money is important, all of these things. Providing value to clients and viewers and all that is extremely important, but not at the cost of the relationship. At least that's the way I
couldn't agree with you more. And now that you said that, for anybody out there that's planning on opening up a business with their father or their daughter, or a daughter with her mother, I say do it. Give it a shot. And try to keep into perspective that revenue, generation money revenue, would be secondary to the relationship that you have. And how many times have we come across with, acquaintances that say, hey, I like the relationship you have with your son. I actually ended up calling my dad the other day. Or I ended up calling my father. I haven't talked to my father in 3 months. We've had that happen.
We've had some people share that.
And that's very fulfilling for Mike and I, to see that in a very small way, we've been able to challenge that energy and say, hey, you know what? Like I told a buddy of ours the other day, call your son. He's not interested in talking to me. Well, what? So what? Call him. And I go, look, put your ego aside. If he hurts you, if you feel something because if something happens to your son, you're going to be by that bedside 24/7 because you love your son. And you can tell by the way he speaks about his son. But he hasn't talked to his son. Now what? Call your son. Forget about everything else. Just call and say, hey, son, how you doing? So that's been very rewarding, And I know that this channel is going to be very successful. I know that.
It already is.
It already is to us.
Yeah.
But I know that our subscribers are going to go through the roof at one point because we're being genuine. And the one thing that we also do, son, is you've been involved in a lot of businesses at your young age. So you bring a lot of opinions into what we discuss, and so do I. And that's another thing. Doing a digital company, you know, these people, or a lot of people say, hey, just use artificial intelligence. But if that's all you use, then where's the personal, you know, touch in it? That's why we put in, you know, a page in our ebooks called Experience, so that it's not just artificial intelligence. There's some personal aspect of me
Yes.
in there. And so, and it's related to business. It's going to be growing in the area of history, Stoic ideals, you know, business and ancient mysteries. And that's what we do. That's what we have, you know.
Very cool.
Thank you for letting me put a plug in for it.
No, it's important. All right.
All right, you take care.
Thanks.